Hello everyone. Now let's see input tax credit and mark it as very important chapter. Okay, so in this what we'll see is the base, the crux of the whole system of value added tax. And as you know, GST is based upon the concept of value added tax. So what is this concept and how this input tax credit comes into picture? Let me explain you in brief, although I know that all of you know because we have been discussing this since the beginning, but still let's see once more in brief, very fast. As you know that indirect tax is on events, right? Indirect tax is on a particular event, and GST is on the event of supply. Supply of what? Goods or service or both. Okay. So when these goods and services are resupplied and then again resupplied, then it becomes a chain of supply. So when there is a chain of supply, means how? A is, say, supplying original goods. So for example, he's a farmer or he's a miner, he mines the goods. Miner means not the child, huh? Miner means the one who takes out the goods from a mine, iron mine, manganese mine, and so on. So why I'm telling you? Because he's the starting point. So in the real industry, actually there is no starting point. Everything is a mesh. There is no starting point. But in theory, we will take a starting point. That A is an original supplier means he doesn't buy anything. He doesn't buy anything. Not even the raw materials. He is not buying anything. He is not taking any kind of supply. So he is the starting point of supplies. He only has sale, no purchases. So therefore I took the example of a miner or an agriculturist. An agriculturist who grows the things and then he sells, or a miner who mines the products, the minerals, and then he sells it. So he can be called as the original supplier. So he supplies the goods to B. B adds some value. B may be a manufacturer or maybe a trader. So what a manufacturer does, he manufactures something new out of it. So A's finished goods become raw material for B, and then he manufactures something else out of it and resells it. Or if he is just a trader, then he will buy and sell, buy and sell. Or he can be a service provider. So he buys these goods, uses them in the course of providing his service. So his inputs may be goods, inputs may be services, output will be service. So basically three types of people are covered in the concept of GST. The manufacturers, the traders who buy and sell. So traders include many type of people like suppliers, you can call them as dealers, you can call them as agents, you can call them as retailers, wholesalers, supply agents, and so on and so forth. There can be thousands of names, but it falls in the category of trading. So manufacturing, trading, or service providers, people who provide service like Farooq Haq. Okay, so these people, they fall in this supply chain. So A supplies to B, then B adds some value and supplies it to C, and C supplies it to D, and so on and so forth. The cycle goes on and on and on and on and on and on until the goods or the service reaches the ultimate consumer. So the cycle ends at the consumer stage. So the whole burden of GST ultimately falls upon the consumer, the end consumer, that is you and me, the poor people of this great nation. Okay, so ultimately we have to bear all the burden. So when I go and buy this t-shirt, whatever GST is applicable on the manufacturer, or we can say right from the cotton grower, but as you know, the agriculturists are exempt. So okay, cotton growing may be exempt, but then the next stage comes is manufacturing of thread, manufacturing of cloth, manufacturing of t-shirt, trading of t-shirt, and again wholesaler, retailer, and finally I go and buy it from a retail shop. So the whole GST which is applied in this whole chain ultimately falls upon us. So therefore this t-shirt is not a light one, it's quite heavy. Now it may be light in weight but very heavy in terms of taxes. Okay, so let's understand the chain. We have seen this chain many times before, but let's see again. So if A's supply attracts a GST, okay, so shall I tell you in detail again? Okay, let's go in detail. Now this whole GST concept has come from the mother concept, and that is VAT, value added tax concept. So let me explain you a pure VAT system first, and this is for your knowledge sake, how the pure VAT system applies. If A sells, so I'll write sale price, SP, sells his goods at say 100, and suppose the tax is at 10%, so he will have to pay tax at 10%, means 10 rupees. Okay, so he'll charge 10 rupees, and his invoice price, IP means invoice price, at which he sells to B, will be 110. And how much he pays to the government? He will pay 10 rupees to the government. Okay, 10 rupees tax which he collects from B will be paid to the government, 100 rupees will go in his pocket, 10 rupees will go to government. Okay, simple. Now when B buys these goods, he will buy at 110. Okay, so he buys at 110. He adds a value. Whatever processing he does, whether he's a manufacturer or a trader, he will add some profit, some costs. So he'll incur some cost and some profit. So that cost and profit is called as value addition. So he'll make a value addition of say 90, and his sale price becomes 200. So this becomes the purchase price, then he adds value and he sells at 200. Now government says that you pay 10% tax. So in the normal course, now I'm not explaining the cascading effect that all of you know, double taxation effect. I'm not explaining that. I'm straight away explaining the value added system, value added tax system. So he's selling at 200, his value addition is only 90. Okay, his value addition is only 90. So he will be required to pay tax only on 90 rupees. So in the VAT system, tax will be only on, so I'll write VAT, though I've written tax here, this is also VAT, VAT tax. So he will pay VAT on 90 only at 10% is equal to 9. That's it, nothing more. Similarly, when the goods go to C at 209, because invoice price will then become 209, he will add value of say 81. So he will sell at a selling price of 290. His value addition is 81. So he will charge VAT on only 81 rupees at 10%, that is 8.1. And so on and so forth. This will go to the next person, and then whatever is his value addition, suppose 120, then he will pay tax on only 120 at 10% means 12 rupees. So he will pay 12 rupees of VAT. So this is called as a pure value added system, VAT system, where you don't pay tax or you don't calculate tax on your cost which has already been taxed earlier. You don't calculate tax on 110, you don't calculate tax on 209. We only calculate tax on the value addition that we have made. 90, 81, 120, and for the first person full 100 is value addition because he has not paid any tax earlier. So all the cost and profit is just value addition. So in this system, the pure VAT system, tax is charged value addition alone. And what do you mean by value addition? Value addition means costs plus profit not taxed earlier. Means any cost which has not been taxed at the earlier stage will become part of value addition. If any cost has been charged earlier, then it will not form part of value addition. So value addition means those costs and profit which is not taxed earlier, at the earlier stage. Okay. So if any services are procured, if any goods are procured which have been charged earlier, then those expenses will not be my value addition. My value addition will only be like labor cost, because there is no VAT on labor. Okay. And the profits and other such expenses, all the other expenses, manufacturing expenses and all, which have not been charged earlier. Okay. So that will be my value addition, and I'll have to pay tax on that. And now the system works great, but there is a problem. Now I'm telling you the reason behind the concept of input tax credit. You must understand that. Okay, so that's why we are studying this, because unless you know, so you'll never understand that why this system of input tax credit. Now what is the problem? Can anyone tell me the problem here? Problem is of tax evasion. Now see, B is paying tax only on his value addition of 90. What if A has not paid tax? If A has not paid tax of this 10 rupees to the government, means he has done tax evasion. How will B come to know that he has done tax evasion? B will not come to know. B will say, look, my value addition is 90, I will pay tax only on 90, that is 9 rupees, that's it. I don't have to see, I don't have to bother about my previous suppliers. I will pay tax on my value addition. I am an honest person, I will pay tax on my value addition. So government will lose money. Means there is no connectivity between these people. Each person will pay tax on his value addition alone. So then there will be a problem. There will be no matching of invoices. His invoice comes to me, right? But I am not concerned with that, whether he has paid tax or not. I will say that, look, law says that I have to pay tax on my value addition. I am going to do that. Suppose C ignores, he doesn't pay tax again, and D has to pay tax. D says, I will pay tax on my value addition. My value addition is 120. I will pay tax just on that. I am not bothered about the earlier people in the chain. So there will be rampant tax evasion. And whenever tax evasion happens, government will have no cover for it. Government will not be able to recover that amount from the next person in the chain. So that is the biggest lacuna, the drawback of the pure VAT system. So therefore, most of the countries, they don't follow pure VAT system. If there is a rampant tax evasion in the different countries, they will not follow the pure VAT system. If everyone is honest, then this is the best system. But as you know, that is not the case, especially in our great nation. We are very intelligent people, so we are not honest. Intelligence doesn't mean honesty. Intelligence, in fact, intelligence is inversely proportional. How do you write inversely proportional? I have forgotten maths. I think something like that, inversely proportional, or I don't know, I'm not sure about whatever the sign may be. It is inversely proportional to honesty. Now you'll challenge me on this, but some great people have said, I think Albert Einstein or somebody Newton, somebody has said that if we were to give, George Bernard Shaw, he was a great parliamentarian in UK, he has said that if we were to give all the knowledge to any person, all the knowledge in the world, we'll make him very intelligent person. He will only learn to argue incorrectly. He will only learn to argue incorrectly. Now this is a fact of the case. You see the biggest names in this country, like lawyers, if you take lawyers, the biggest lawyers in this country, what they have done? They have saved criminals. They save criminals, and therefore they become big names. They charge huge amount of fees to save you guys from dishonesty. So it is not that you have not done anything wrong, but they have such great mind that they can argue things incorrectly and save you from gallows. Therefore they become great, because they win case. Who is the best CA? One who can save tax for his clients. So if we were to give complete intelligence, you will not become a person with wisdom. Rather, 99% of the time the person will turn dishonest. Okay, forget everything that I am telling you. This is not a spiritual class, so let's come down to reality. So this is the fact of the case. Okay, so therefore government knows about this, so they said that no, we need to have a system of cross checking. Unless there is a cross check, we will never know that there is a tax evasion and will not be able to recover it. So they have said that forget this system, we'll follow a new system, and this has been followed since long. The system had been followed in excise earlier, in service tax, in state VAT also. So in state VAT they had VAT credit system. In central, that is for excise and service tax together, they had the system called as CENVAT credit, Central Value Added Tax System. Okay, CENVAT, CENVAT was there. So how this, and then in the new law it has been carried forward with changes, and now it is called as the input tax credit system. Okay, so how this functions and how does it stop the avoidance of tax? Let's see. This is A, he supplies to B, he supplies to C, he supplies to, okay, let's take directly consumer. Okay, A, B, C, and then consumer. So if A supplies at say 1000 rupees, his sale price is 1000, we will charge tax on full 1000, so it comes to 100. So his invoice price will become 1100. Now how much tax he pays to the government? He will pay full 100 to the government, because he is the first person in the chain, he is the originator in the chain. So for him full 1000 is value addition, he will pay tax on full 1000, that is 100 rupees. Now for B, B purchases these goods. So what he will do is, when he buys these goods, he will record purchase at 1000, excluding the tax amount. So he will record purchases at 1000, excluding the tax. Okay. Now the supply is at 1100. So what accounting entry he will pass? If you want to know the accounting entry, purchase account debit 1000, input tax credit account debit 100. So this 100 will be transferred to tax credit account, to bank 1100. Okay, purchase account debit 1000, input tax credit account debit, credit account debit. Now here I will also explain this credit and debit, 100 to party account or bank account, credit 1100. Okay, then he will add his value addition, whatever value addition he does, maybe another 1500 value addition. So his total sale price will become 2500. Now he will apply tax, that is here we call as GST. He will apply tax. Now the rate is say 10%, so that will come to 250. So in pure value added tax system, what we do is we charge tax only on value addition, but in ITC method, input tax credit system, or we can say just tax credit system, the tax is charged on full sale price. Okay, full sale price. So my invoice value will become 2750. But how much tax am I going to pay to the government? How much tax will I pay to government? So I will pay this 250 that I am charging here, less this 100 which I have paid on my purchases. So this 100 was given to me as credit, so I will set off this credit against my output liability. So this 100 will be set off here. So my payment will be 250 minus 100 is equal to 150. Now if you see, this 150 is nothing but 10% of 1500. That is value addition. So ultimately I am paying my tax on value addition only. But there is a check in this, a check for tax evasion. How? If this person has not paid this 100 rupees to the government, okay, if this person doesn't pay this 100 rupees to the government, you will not get this set off. So this set off which we are giving here, the ITC set off, this is called a set off. Here we take the credit and then we use it. So this is utilization of credit. When I pass the purchase entry, I took credit, and this is I am utilizing the credit. Means set off. This set off is allowed only when this person has paid the tax. And in GST, we'll see later on, there are a few sections for this. The checking, the cross check of returns. So this person has to file his output supply return, and this person also has to file his input return. So you have to give the output return and the input return, and these two matches. So he will show the sale with my GSTN number. I will show purchase with his GSTN number. So these two will auto-populate in the computer system of the government, and it will relate. So when these two are related, I will get the credit, and then I can set off. So this set off is allowed only when this person has shown this tax in his return, and I will show as purchase from him. So every person has to file his sales details and the purchase details, the supply and the procurement. Both details are given. When the cross match happens, only then the credit is allowed, and then I will pay difference of 150. So what happens here? If this person does a tax evasion, if he doesn't pay, I will not get the set off, and if I don't get set off, I'll have to pay full 250. Means what? The evasion done by A is automatically recovered at the next stage. So if my supplier has evaded tax, I will have to pay the tax on that value. So what happens? There is a inherent, the tax evasion is inherently discouraged, because if a person in the chain avoids tax, government has nothing to worry. The next person will pay tax on that. So now the government will worry only when the whole chain avoids tax, and that is very difficult. How is that possible? There can be 15 persons in the chain. How can everyone avoid tax? If everyone avoids tax, the government has ways to catch them. If this whole chain is avoiding tax, it's simple to catch now. If one person avoids, then it's difficult. But if the whole chain is avoiding, it's simple to catch. So this is the main system. So this, first you take credit and then you set off. Therefore this is called as credit method. So first we charge tax on full sale price, and then we allow set off of the tax paid at the earlier stage. So this tax is allowed as credit to him, and then he uses it to set off against his liability. So his liability is 250, but he has got credit. Credit will be set off. Balance he has to pay net to the government. Understood? Clear? So this is the main concept of ITC. And then if you go to the third stage, so let's take one more example so it will make more clear. Now the next stage is C. C will record, he pays how much? 2750. So he pays 2750 money to B. But how will he record the purchase entry? 2500. Purchase 2500. And tax credit account debit 250. Okay, so 250 will go in his tax credit account. Then he will do value addition of say another 3000. So his sale price becomes 5500. Tax at the rate of 10% will come to 550. His invoice price will become 6050. But how much he'll pay to the government? 550, that is his liability, less the credit which he has got from the earlier stage, that is 250. So 250 is the credit allowed to him. So he will set off this 250 and pay 300. Ultimately, how much the government recovers? Government recovers 100 from this stage, 150 at this stage, and 300 at this stage. So government is recovering total 550 only. but small amounts from each supplier in the chain. So total collection by the government comes to 550, which is the ultimate tax which is imposed by C and passed on to the consumer. So how much burden ultimately passes on to the consumer? Burden of GST falling upon the consumer is 550. That is the tax which is charged on the ultimate sale price. But this 550 is not collected from one person. Government collects it from 3 different people of small amounts, aggregating 550. And look at one more thing, and this may come as a theory question, that how GST helps in eradicating avoidance of tax or stopping avoidance of tax. If such a question comes, a logical question, then you will be able to answer this. Explain this concept in your own words. And there's one more point, that if suppose one person evades tax, like for example B evades tax, so 100 rupees will be paid by A, B will pay nothing because he is evading tax, and he will not give a tax invoice to C. So what C will have to do, he will have to pay this 550 full because he will not get this 250 credit. So then ultimately the tax collected by the government will be higher. How? 100 rupees paid by A and 550 paid by C. So total tax collected by government will be 650. So government says, okay, now go and avoid tax. We will recover more tax. See the advantage of this system. If any intermediate supplier, see, suppliers can be categorized as 3. Original supplier, the first supplier, then the intermediate ones, which can be thousands and thousands in between, and the final supplier. The supplier who sells to consumer is the final supplier in the chain. So original, intermediate, final. So if any of the intermediate persons avoid tax, government has absolutely nothing to worry, because they will recover it from the next stage. And what happens is that the credit that was available here, this tax, this credit will not be allowed to see directly. These are very technical points, huh? Understand very carefully. This credit will not be allowed to see directly. The credit passes on in the chain by one person to another only. This is a very important thing. It passes on to B, it passes on to C, it will pass on to D and E and F and G and H and I. Even if there are 1,000 people in the chain, the credit passes on by one to the other to the third and fourth and fifth and sixth. So if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are paying tax, sixth one avoids tax. The seventh person in the chain will not get the credit of tax paid by the first 5 people, because the sixth one has avoided tax. So therefore you ultimately pay more tax to the government. Understood? So for the credit to pass on, it's important that tax is paid at every stage. Every stage. That is very, very crucial and important. And this happens not just in avoidance of tax, it also happens in a genuine case of exemption. Remember this one point. It also happens in exemption. If the product sold by B is exempt from GST, just imagine that this is exempted by the government. Then what will happen? This raw material supplied by A is taxable, so he will pay 100 rupees to government. But B will not charge tax because his supply is exempted. So no tax will be forwarded to C. So for C the purchase tax is 0. Input tax is 0. So, but his output is taxable. So he will pay 550 again to the government. And this 100 rupee will not be allowed as credit to C. So ultimately we pay more tax. So understood? Exemptions are also dangerous at times. They are dangerous, yes. And therefore I'll connect one link, one point. We had seen exemption chapter, a list of services which are exempt, and there are many goods also which are exempt, but that is out of course, so we haven't seen the notifications for goods, right? But we have seen notification for services. How many services were there? Lot many services were there. Then in the original notification there were 82 services, and then there were a few other notifications. So in all those cases, what is happening? Double taxation. Exemption leads to double taxation. This was a very grave situation, because if the exemption is allowed to an intermediate person, then it leads to double taxation, because he cannot take credit of his purchases because he is not paying tax on his output. So if your output is exempt, you cannot take this credit, and you cannot pass on this credit to the next person as well. You cannot pass on. So the next person has to pay tax on full value addition, including the value addition of B. So though we say that B is exempt, but his value addition forms part of cost here, and it will be taxed again. So ultimately it is taxed. So all the exemptions work only when the exemption is given to the final supplier. If this person is exempted, then it's fine. Then the exemption is there. It passes on to consumer. But if any intermediate person is given exemption, then it is of no value, because that exemption is no exemption. Because this value addition, though exempted here, will become taxable in the hands of the next supplier. Understood? So therefore, now remember when we were discussing exemption section 11, I had told you that there are two types of exemptions. One is absolute. Absolute means you don't have a choice to take or not to take exemption. You have to take it. So one is absolute. The second is optional, which is conditional. Conditional exemptions are optional. So exemptions can be of two types: absolute, conditional. If it is conditional, it is optional. You may take, you may not take. So whenever an exemption is optional and you are an intermediate person in the chain, you should opt not to take the exemption. Because if you take exemption, then the whole credit is lost. The earlier credits are lost, and ultimately the product becomes costlier. So if you are an intermediate person and the government offers you a conditional exemption, please avoid it. You must avoid it. So these are very technical points. A question may come. These are not written anywhere. These are to be understood. These are the logic based points. The logical points which you have to understand. Okay. So if it is a conditional exemption, he should not go for it. If it is an absolute, there is no choice. So he has to go for it. But if it is conditional, avoid the exemption. But if you are a final supplier, then you can take the exemption. It will be beneficial, because your value addition of 3000 will become exempt from tax. These 2% will pay tax, but your value addition will become exempt. So the tax will be 300 rupees less. The final burden that passes on will be 250 and not 550. So final seller will have a choice. If he wants to take, he should take the exemption. But if you are intermediate supplier, don't take exemptions. And even composition scheme. One more point I'll explain you. Composition scheme also we had seen. Now if B is offered a composition scheme, he's a small dealer, he was offered a composition scheme. What happens in composition scheme? He pay tax on his total sales at a very nominal figure, 1%, or hotel 5% was there, right? So should he go for composition scheme? No, because in composition scheme the same thing happens. This credit is not allowed here, and his tax, whatever he pays at 1%, will not be allowed as credit to the next person. So the ultimately what happens is this credit is also lost, and his tax of 5-7 rupees will also be lost. No credit will be allowed to the third person. So ultimately the products will become costlier, and you will end up paying more tax in the whole chain. So as I told for exemption, same logic applies for composition scheme. Intermediate suppliers should never opt for composition scheme. Final seller may opt. If you are a final seller, then you have a choice. You may opt or you may pay. It's up to you. If you opt, it's beneficial. You take composition scheme, that is beneficial. But if you are intermediate supplier, the first or the second or the third or the fourth in the cycle, never take composition scheme, because the credit is lost. Okay, so understood the concept of ITC, input tax credit system. First you calculate tax on the wholesale price, then you deduct the tax that has been paid on inputs and pay the difference to the government. And what are the benefits of this? Number one, the tax evasion is avoided. That is the main benefit to the government. That even if the intermediate suppliers go for tax evasion, that evasion will ultimately be recovered from the next supplier who pays tax. And another point, how the government will know that the whole chain is paying tax? By matching the invoices, okay, through the returns. So returns that we have to file every month is the system of cross check, and this happens in the computerized environment. So there is a big computer system of the government which is called as GSTN, the network, and all the data feeds in there. The supplier has to feed his data of supplies, the buyers will have to feed data of the purchases that they have made and the GSTs that have been paid on their purchases. Then it gets matched up in the computer system and the credit flows. So it's all happening in the computerized environment. Though these returns have been brought, GSTR1 and GSTR2, and there is a cross checking and all, we'll see the sections also and the rules. But now the government is thinking of making it more simplified, because the present system is quite complicated and lot of data has to be inputted into the system, and you have to employ an accountant to do that and a knowledgeable person to do that, and then a little bit mistake here and there, even clerical mistake, will end up in catastrophe. The credit doesn't get passed on. So they are now trying to simplify the system. Let's see when the simplified system comes into picture. Okay, so now let's come back. Now let's start with this chapter. So in the introduction it is given that GST is nothing but value added tax. Now you can relate, right? This is value added tax only, but you can say a modified system. Real value added tax system works only on value addition. It doesn't calculate tax on the cost of inputs. But in our system, we calculate tax on the full sale price, which includes the cost of inputs plus value addition. So you can say the GST is a modified form of value added tax. Okay. So it says GST is nothing but a value added tax on goods and services combined. It is these provisions of input tax credit that makes GST a value added tax. There is collection of tax at all points in the supply chain. Now you can relate supply chain, after allowing credit for the input or input services and capital goods. Credit is also allowed for the tax paid on capital goods. Now these points we will understand in due course of discussion. The invoice method, now this is called also as the invoice method. The credit method is also called as invoice method. You apply tax on full sale price, okay, and then set off the earlier tax. So calculation method is called as the invoice method. Of value added taxation will be followed in GST2, with the tax paid at the time of receipt of goods or services or both. So this is called as inputs. Tax paid at the time of receipt of goods means which goods? The inputs or input services will be eligible for set off against the tax payable on supply of goods or service or both, based on the invoices. So invoice is the documentary evidence. This is important. Invoices are very important in this credit system, with a special emphasis on actual payment of tax by the supplier. Supplier pays tax, then the credit is allowed to you and you can set off. The procedures and restrictions laid down in these provisions are important to make sure that there is a seamless flow of credit in the whole scheme of taxation without any misuse. So that is the main crux. Misuse has to be avoided. Okay. Okay, so now one more thing I'll explain you. and then we'll start with the actual definitions. As it was written here that the ITC, that is input tax credit. So let's take an example of how it happens. So here is a supplier, for example Faruka classes. So whatever input goods I buy, input goods means the raw materials. For a service provider it can be something like the stationery that I purchase, the notes that I purchase, and so on and so forth, which then I supply to you along with my service. So input goods. For a manufacturer, input goods will have a huge worth, raw materials. For a service provider there can be some inputs. So there are input goods on which there is GST paid at the time of purchase. Then you will have input services. So in the course of my business I use a lot of services like audit service. A CA gives me audit service. Then for construction of my classroom I take services of an architect, an engineer, and so on and so forth. Then in the regular course we take services of advertising and marketing and so many other services, telephone bills and this and that. So many input services we require in our business. So there will be GST on those services also. And then I buy capital goods. Capital goods means like computers, machineries, plants and equipments, and so on and so forth, furniture. So there is GST paid on them also. All these will be allowed as credit. So they are allowed to me as input tax credit. So that is called as ITC in short. Allowed to me as input tax credit. So when these things will be purchased and they come to my premises, I will take credit, and this is called as availment. So you must remember these two words, availment and utilization. So these are technical words. You cannot misuse them, otherwise it will change the whole meaning of your answer. This is called as availment of input tax credit. So I'll take credit. Okay, input tax credit. Okay, now here I'll also explain the debit and credit system, so don't worry. Let me finish this example first. So we take input tax credit. Now why the input tax credit is given? To avoid double taxation, right? That everyone knows, cascading effect of tax, there is double taxation. To avoid double taxation, this is the system, the VAT system or the GST credit system. That of course everyone knows. Now what I'm going to do is my output supply. So my supplies will depend upon who I am. If I'm a service provider, my supply will be service, or if I'm a manufacturer or a trader, my supply will be of goods. So supply of goods or service, as the case may be, or both. We can be supplying both goods as well as services. So whatever GST comes on my output supply, outward supply. So this is also called as inward, this is outward, or input, output, okay, or procurement and supply. Different words can be used. So what I'll do now is I will set off this credit against this GST payable. So this is GST payable liability, you can say. So this availment of credit, then I will utilize here, I will set off. So this set off is called as utilization of input tax credit. So this credit that I have availed, avail means you took credit, you accept the credit, and now you are paying that credit, you are utilizing the credit. Okay, so we take and we utilize, we take and we utilize. It's like that. So set off means utilization of credit. So never forget these two technical things. Availment means taking credit on inputs. Utilization means setting it off against my output liability. And then the difference, if any, will have to be paid. So this is the actual payment. Payment will be done of the difference. So suppose my liability is 7,000 and my credit available is 5,000, so I'll have to pay 2,000. This 2,000 will be paid by us in cash. Okay, understood this concept? Very good. pay the difference, if any. Now sometimes there may not be any difference. Sometimes the liability is less and the credits available are more. Liability is 5,000 but credit available to me is 7,000. So I will set off this 5,000 in my credit account itself, and I'll still be left with 2,000 credit that will be carried forward to the next month. Okay, and what will be my cash liability? Nothing, 0. Now I'll introduce the account names also here, but before I introduce you to the names of the accounts that we are going to maintain here, let us clear first our minds, reopen your mind, reboot your mind. Okay, done? Very good. Now just listen to me. When I talk about the accounts, they will be from 2 point of views. My point of view, the assessee's point of view, and the government's point of view. Okay, my account, government's account. My account means my financial records. Government account means the actual accounts that we have to use in this system, and these accounts will be opened on the portal itself. They are government accounts, not my account. The simplest example I can give to understand this is the bank account. Okay, I have got a bank account in so and so bank, Punjab National Bank. But that is a deposit account, not a loan account. Okay, so I am not Nirav Modi. Okay, so we have got a bank account. So we keep bank account in our records, in our financial records, and bank also maintains my account with them. Okay, so when I deposit say 1,000 rupees into my bank, what entry do I pass in my records, financial records? Bank account debit to cash. If I go and deposit cash, what entry I'll pass? Bank account debit to cash. For the same transaction, what will be the entry passed by bank in its account? Bank will maintain my account, Farooq account. So what they'll do? They will say cash account debit. They are receiving cash. Cash account debit to Farooq account. So bank is crediting Farooq and I am debiting bank. Okay, this is a simple journal entry you must have studied in your 11th 12th CPT. Good, simple thing. So this availment of credit, okay, FHC account, my financial records, and the government record. I'll not say account, I'll say record. Okay, so government record for this is called as electronic credit ledger. So here you now remember this word. The ITC account in government record will be called as electronic, because they are maintained online, so they are called as electronic. They are all electronic form, no physical book and all. Electronic credit ledger. What it is called as? Electronic credit ledger. Okay, and my account, I will name it whatever I want to name it. It's up to me. It is my financial record. I can name anything. So I will name it as say ITC credit account or ITC account, input tax credit account. Okay. So what I'll do in my account is, for the purchases, this is purchase. As I told you, if I'm purchasing something for 10,000, let's take it as 10,000 plus GST of say 1,800. So total amount of purchase is 11,800. Okay. So what entry I'll pass in my account? Purchase account debit 10,000. So that will go in purchase account. ITC account debit 1,800. So here I'll debit 1,800 against this purchase. Okay. In my records, Farooq records, I will debit. It will be called as ITC account debit 1,800 to bank 11,800. So the purchase entry would be purchase account debit 10,000. GST is 1,800, so that will go here. debit. Okay, debit. ITC account debit 1800, and to bank 11,800. Now a confusion may come in your minds, and therefore I am taking this in detail. We are calling it as input tax credit. I have availed input tax credit. I have availed credit. I have availed credit of 1800. And then you will say, but we are debiting. I am calling I have availed credit, but see, I am debiting 1800 to my ITC account. So please understand this jargon right now at the inception stage. Otherwise, it will create a havoc as we move ahead. Okay, these are very primary things you have to clear right now. When okay, am I an accounts teacher or a taxation teacher? Tell me first. I am a tax teacher. Okay, so I am a law teacher. Law means taxation laws. Who has written the law? We or the government? The government. Very good. So government is using the word credit. So now that example that I gave you, bank and ourselves. So bank is the government now. Take an example. Government is bank. Okay. So when I deposit 1,000 with the bank, what the bank does? It credits my account. So what the government will do? It will credit my account. So this 1800 you just consider as if we have paid this 1800 to government in advance. It's like that only. Yes, we have paid 1800 to government in advance. So what the government will do? It will credit Farooq Haq account. Okay. So government record, that is the electronic credit ledger, we are talking about this. So when in law I will say availment of credit, we are talking from government record point of view, not our financial record. So in this whole chapter, we'll always talk from government's point of view, not my financial records point of view. So my financial records point of view, it will be debit. But in electronic credit ledger that I am maintaining, this is also online. So as I deposit, I can go on my portal, I can enter my details, the login ID, password, and I can see my account. So my account will be credited by 1800 rupees. So this is the ITC that we are talking about in law. So when I say availment of credit, it is from government's record point of view. So government will credit my account, Farooq Haq electronic credit ledger. It will be called as Farooq Haq electronic credit ledger. 1800 credited. In my financial records, it will be debited. And then when I am setting off here, so say my liability here is say 5,000 and I am setting off this 1800. So when I do that, what will happen? This entry of utilization will be in electronic credit ledger, it will be debited. Okay. So this availment credit comes here. Utilization debit will come here. So utilization will come here 1800. 1800. So suppose my output liability was 5,000. So 5,000 minus 1800, I'll have to pay how much? 3,200 in cash. Okay. So I'll debit that 1800 here. And from my account point of view, the availment comes as debit and the utilization will come as credit. So this utilization will go here 1800. So my account will be exactly, you can say, mirror effect, inverse of the government record, which is called as electronic credit ledger. Now what about this 3,200 that I'll have to pay in cash? So for that, there is another account of the government called as electronic cash ledger. So this 3,200, so what happens there is I have to pay. So when I pay the amount to the government, it is credited to my electronic cash ledger, and then this amount of 3,200 will be debited to the electronic cash ledger. So this adjustment will come in electronic cash ledger. So whatever cash deposits I do will come as credit, and then this 3,200 that I am paying out of this balance will come as debit. So this will come here as debit. So first I have to have credit in order to debit. So I can deposit exactly 3,200, or I can deposit something more. I may keep 10,000 deposit, and then I will set off 3,200, and the balance will appear in my cash ledger, which I can set off later on. I can go on making payment anytime. Okay, so deposits, whatever money we deposit with the government through challans will be credited to electronic cash ledger, and then the payments that we adjust there will be debited. So payment means debit to electronic cash ledger. So there will be two things. It is not just that I pay cash. No, we deposit cash and then we set off the payment against that deposit. So deposit comes in electronic cash ledger as a credit, and the payment of tax is by way of debit to electronic cash ledger. So my total payment will go like this. I have to pay 5,000. So 5,000, how will I pay? 1,800 will be debited to electronic cash ledger. Sorry, electronic credit ledger, and the balance 3,200 will be debited to electronic cash ledger. This is the payment entry. Understood? Simple. So all these are technical things. We are readying the foundation right now in order to build a building on it. Great. So understood these concepts? Excellent. So what we'll do here is take a break, and then, because a lot of stuff I have told you, you have to take some time to recall it and fix it and remember it. And in the next lecture then we'll start with the real things, the definitions, and then go on to the sections.